Okay, so I'm making a clay chuck on the potter's wheel. So to begin the chuck, you make sure you have enough clay for whatever form that you're wanting to trim. I don't know if you can see them, but here I have a hollow chuck. That's for long neck vases, long neck bottles. It's also good for very large bowls. On the one on the left, that one's a little bit smaller, meant for trimming like 8, honestly anywhere between about 6 and 20 ounces, depending on the shape and size of your cup. And each chuck has its own purpose. And so today I'm going to be making several chucks just for you guys. We had a request from Mackenzie, and I'm going to be demonstrating all the necessary aspects of what you need to do. Number one being, make sure that you properly center. Clay has a very distinct memory, and so because I need these chucks to be basically perfect, I need them to be perfectly round, perfectly flat on the base, perfectly even in the wall, and because of that, if I were to do any less centering than you see me doing, these chucks would degrade about roughly 10 times faster, and I've done some experiments in that. But when you throw the chuck correctly and you make sure that the internal structure of the clay that's moving in the same direction is all equal, then it has a much more long-lasting effect, and it also increases the density of those particles against one another. Or at least that's my version of it. Maybe 1 or 2 more times up and down, and then I'll start centering the core once it's mostly aligned. And as usual, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Hey Maria, can you share the video on a group named Clay Buddies? That's the kind of movement in the core I'm looking for. Most important thing when you're attempting this type of centering, which I don't suggest until you've gotten used to the normal centering, eventually you receive a type of centering that is a full alignment of the vortex. Once that happens, any motion affects the entire piece of clay. And that's what's happening there, in case you're wondering. And remember, feel free to ask any questions. I know the way I do things is a little bit weird, and there is no bad question, so have at it. And now I'm going to test the core and see if it's where I want it to be. Not yet. Still has a little bit of resistance. I kind of just want to see, or want you guys to be able to see the actions from almost a first point perspective. That way, if you ever try to do this stuff, it'll be a little bit easier to recreate for your body. Alright, that is a very strong core. It has its own movement now, and it really likes the way that it's feeling, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it into something. Awesome. So that's the softness that I'm looking for. imagine how much or how little pressure goes into doing that. And now this is the hardest part, making a choice. What kind of chuck would I like to make? I think because of this size, I'm going to go for a very long neck bottle chuck. Alright, so step number 1. I came up an inch above the wheelhead, brought in the wall, and now this is going to be my extra base. This is what's going to allow your chuck to remain spinning on the wheel without flying off due to your immense pressures from your trimming. And you need this extra stability to be able to hold aloft something that's going to be sitting up this tall. You want all of your weight to be on the base. The lower the center of gravity, the better, because as you press in multiple directions, that lower gravity keeps it from tipping over, which is very important when you're making these. Now, even though this is about almost an inch thick, I'm going down to a half an inch thick from the bottom to conserve clay. The strength of the base is the least of your worries. What you need is the strength of the outside rim, strength of your top rim, and then a descending strength all the way into the base, because all those pressures are going to be directed downward into the center. Remember, we took a lot of time centering here, and that's why the clay was moving so uniformly, because anything that is done to one piece is done to the rest. Okay, now this next portion is very important. I'm going to show you first what you don't want to do, and hopefully it doesn't affect my chuck. It's very likely that it might affect my chuck, but I'm going to do it anyway just so you guys can see what not to do, okay? Now, this goes against a lot of the ways things are taught, and I apologize about that. It's just about everything I do. It's very important that you do not try to turn the fingertips and lift up on the clay. I'm going to show you why you don't want to do that. It is the illusion of solidity that encourages that action. You believe you can get underneath it and then lift it up. Rather, what I'm going to be doing in the second demonstration is more like squeezing some type of liquid out of a tube. In so doing, when you do it the first way, which is what you don't want to do, you get two separate independent layers moving up along the wall and a small portion of upwards motion of the clay. But the important part is that if you lift up, when you get to the top, you're going to get these two little tiny layers that come up over the top. It's the equivalent of the volcano when you're centering. That's also why you don't want to try and lift upwards during the centering process. That's what creates your volcano. Instead, you want to press lightly, and as the clay moves past your fingers, you simply follow that clay, holding that pressure, just like squeezing water out of a tube or any kind of liquid out of a tube. Okay? And so here goes step number 1, which you don't want to do. This goes for all creations of cylinders. Okay, so I'm going to go into the interior and exterior. I'm then going to turn my fingers and lift upwards along the wall. And there it is. This very distinct look here. Okay? See, I don't know if you can see from your angle, but there's a layer here at the top, and on the interior there's also a second layer, as if you were trying to do a double-lidded jar. However, this is all liquid clay, and it's all liquid clay until that point right there. This is why you do not want to do that. It's two separate layers moving up along the wall. You can always tell by the deep grooves left behind the fingertips, and you can also tell by this distinct double wall at the top. You do not want to have that. That's how you're going to end up messing up your rims. So if I just continue that motion all the way to the top, this happens every time. Liquid clay, second layer of glaze or clay, just falls right off of the piece because it was moving independently. We do not want independent movement from our cylinder because this clay has a life of its own. We've cultivated that by giving it a vortex that it follows, and so when you act against that vortex, you're not going to get the movement that you want. So I'm just going to go ahead and even just cut that top off because it's mostly liquidy clay. Okay. So hopefully, like I said, this doesn't affect my chuck. I can already feel these tiny little layers of clay starting to accumulate on the rim. Hopefully my next motions will allow the clay to return to its original uniformity. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So I still felt a little layering happening, but that's okay. I think I'll be able to salvage this chuck. Okay, so I have a pretty decent height here, but it's just not tall enough for the type of bottle I want to make. It's been so long since I've given myself one of these chucks, which means that I also don't make those tall neck bottles because I don't have a chuck for them. This is the double-edged sword of making chucks and using chucks, is that sometimes you will not make things that you want because you don't have the appropriate chuck. It gives you that much ability to do it, and so I'm going to go ahead and make myself a little bit taller neck chuck. Okay, And then bringing it in is going to increase the thickness evenly as I go up, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Okay, and that's chuck number one. Now, very important, I have a very distinct luxury that maybe some of you don't have. I've got a lot of wheels here. I also have the distinct luxury of not having any classes for the next 4 days. So, because it's winter, it's going to take about that long for them to dry, and I have to let them dry on the potter's wheel. The only other option is throwing them on bats, but even that is going to give you some troubles. So if you are going to throw it on a bat, make sure that you throw it on a plastic bat, not a warpable bat. You want this thing to sit perfectly flat for the entire drawing process. If there's any type of movement on the bottom of the piece, as these pieces dry, they become unlevel, and we try to use them on the potter's wheel, they just flop around. They have to remain perfectly flat. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to the next wheel, wash my hands so I can move the camera, and then I'm going to do another chuck. Like I said, this is a very rare chuck for me. I don't really give myself this kind of privilege. 2 reasons. I live a communal studio here, and because of that, this chuck probably only has a shelf life, no pun intended, of about maybe 3-4 months before somebody uses it for the wrong purpose and destroys it. And that's okay. I don't fire these chucks. These chucks are meant to be recycled as they break. Very important for the way that we do things here. There's no waste. And so for a fire chuck to be just broken and it would be useless to us. And so I'm going to leave it just like this. I'm going to clean up the bottom, make sure that it has a very distinct edge, and then just let it sit for the rest of the week. And because I touched the base, any missed motion will create a wobble at the top, and so now I have to go back and make sure my top is still steady. It might appear to be steady on camera, but I have a weird way of looking at things. And like I said, it's very important that these dry on the wheel head. Just realized I made a big mistake. I have to go back in and remove the liquid clay and water left at the base. Welcome. Oh, I didn't see you go by the first time. Alright, so since I'm going to be making some smaller chucks, and I had a question about it, I'm going to go ahead and put you guys front row of the whole process. Alright, that being said, I won't be able to see your comments. However, if you have anything to ask, I will be checking them every couple minutes. These chucks are going to start flying out now that I'm not going to be explaining much. And so you can ask me about each individual chuck. In general, I'm preparing for an event that we're going to help host in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a tea and music festival being held by #TLIT. And so I'm going to be making all kinds of stuff for them, which means I have to have all kinds of chucks. TLIT imports fine, ethically sourced loose leaf tea, and so these items really have to be pristine because it's expected of all their clients. These are also going to be made for Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese style. And so they're going to be incredibly small. And so these chucks that I have to create have to correspond so that I don't have any difficulties with trimming any of these crazy items I'm going to be making for this event. Okay, the number one thing I'm going to have to make for this show is going to be tasting cups. These tasting cups hold very little liquid, and that's just part of the origin of the style. These tasting cups are probably going to be an ounce or less, and so the chuck has to correspond. Now, an important thing is if the chuck is too light, it will just tumble off of the wheel. It needs a substantial base to hold it on, that bottom heavy thing I was talking about. Same thing with these little tiny cup chucks. They also have to have that same level of weight distribution. Welcome back!
to see how wet my clay is.
All right, good luck. It's winter.
I just can't manage to organize my life.
Can't blame you. 33 years running, and I still haven't figured it out.
Still have to display, yes. Got a ways to go. But I can go ahead and pull a handle. That'll be something productive to do.
Exactly. Running low?
The supply is dwindling.
I need to get me some crank oil for my pug mill. As soon as that happens, we'll be overflowing with clay.
Okay. You making your own music today?
Mm-hmm. You should see when I'm by myself. I've got maybe 60 songs that I committed 100% of the lyrics to. Have I showed you this type of centering before? Have you ever seen me on the wheel? A couple times, right?
Well, you were videotaping yourself one day, but quite frankly, I was too interested in the videotape process than the...
Right? So this is what I call core centering, or advanced centering, or vortex cultivation. And that's where you allow the clay to move as a liquid and try not to impede its process with any type of physicality. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I no more understand how you do that than fly.
Well, you know.
By the time we get around to me having my lesson,
exactly.
We're going to be backed up for 3 months.
Right?
We had to book a whole day for it.
All right. I'm down, if you're willing.
Now, you know, we talked, I asked you about the trimming on those things.
The chucks.
Yeah, the chucks. And I got to thinking, since we don't have that many of them where I throw in Kansas City, for me to spend time learning how to do that probably wouldn't be in my best interest. Better I could get better at centering.
All right. Whatever you want to learn first, but I'll tell you, you're going to end up at that chuck if you end up liking what I do. That's what I'm making right now. I got a request online for a demonstration on how to make them. And so I went and did all the explaining on that one, and now I'm just going to be pumping them out and let people see what they look like.
What I've never been able to do is make anything of size.
That's also very easy.
So I've heard.
I find it easier than doing small stuff, personally. I mean, of course, it takes much longer, but it's almost like trying to do something on the large scale that you have already done.
That's softer than the last. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Don't worry about it. And so it's kind of like trying to draw something really huge instead of really tiny. You know, if you stand far away, you know, it's so much easier. I find that the same with making the clay. The bigger stuff allows for much greater mistakes. Okay.
I just have to use this.
You can use whatever you like. You got the whole studio to yourself.
I was saying, as a thing of water to drip into.
Oh, okay. This one's fresh here. That one's pretty old.
Well, I'm just going to pull into it.
Cool. Old school potter.
I think I was taught by old school person.
Mm-hmm. Modern potters are like, oh my gosh, that water is a day old. I am not getting near that. It's like Too much Discovery Channel. Not enough nature.
At home I'd be pulling over a 55-gallon barrel. Probably it's like 3 weeks old.
Right?
I thought, well, I'd combine the pots outside, and I walked out the door and go,
that ain't gonna happen. Can't dry with ice crystals. Good old handles.
Yeah, I had a lump in it.
It was a hard realization for me that I had to start making stuff with handles. You know, I thought I could just be so cool that people would be like, we can drink in his cups without handles. Nope, not that cool. I had a minimum of an inch deep footwell in all my cups so they can be held like a Japanese cup.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody...
Which is fine, that's not necessarily what everyone wants.
Exactly, that's exactly my point. See, I try to go for function regardless, right? And even though a handle can be functional, it is only a limited time function. Very nice, I like that one.
That had, I came across a couple of dried lumps of clay in it.
Oh no.
Maybe that's a function of being at the bottom of the proverbial barrel.
Honestly, it's a function of people reaching in with very dirty hands.
That, I kind of maybe those are connected too.
I think so. All right, Chuck number 2.
This is all I'm going to accomplish today.
Hey.
I don't like the frozen.
Exactly. Honestly, anytime you're on the wheel or doing pottery, I think is good for you. Even if it is only a couple of minutes. Anything that reminds you that you're part of a creative process, a never-ending, changing universe. A lot less to worry about after that. What you got going on today?
Not much. A few of us are going to go to the River of Lights tonight because I think it's as warm as it's going to be for the rest of the winter.
Right? Do it while you can.
Well, and with an overcast today, the temp's not going to drop as fast tonight.
Ah, true.
So
true. Because we'll have an atmosphere. Yay! Thank you, atmosphere, for blanking us in new warmth. Okay. Chuck number 3. And if I were smart, the first time I would have brought over my trays.
that white glaze was a little bit softer than the stuff I tried at first.
Yeah. When you first came in, I had the remainders of this very large order of about a ton of clay.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, because I was ordering so much, I wanted it to be the way I liked it.
Yeah.
And so I ordered it as a 7 in the hardness scale,
Mm-hmm.
which is usually like a porcelain. And then this one I just bought as a consumer, without them mixing it pre-batch for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way that it came out for them.
I may play with that a bit.
Yeah, it's really fun. It throws almost like a porcelain. It's like
I've been porcelain for
It's like
and I found B-Mix that a little bit less expensive and a little more forgiving.
Well, I just put a down payment on a gas kiln that can take us to Cone 10. And so we'll start doing translucent porcelain soon.
All I can say, the clay guild in Kansas City always used to do only Cone 10. And then they added in Cone 6.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you're going to manage keeping people from
mixing
it up. There was a Cone 6 that went in the Cone 10 that destroyed the entire... We're talking, this is a huge, huge kiln.
Like a guile?
Yeah, it destroyed hundreds of pieces.
I believe it. At that temperature, it becomes a glaze.
Well, it's just a molten mass. That destroyed the shelves, destroyed the uprights.
Ugh.
I mean, they never let us minions play with loading and unloading the kiln. They had
what we'll do
knowledgeable people to do that.
Exactly. What we'll do is, I'm really good at keeping stuff separate. So, what we'll probably do is have separate room altogether.
I mean, that's why when I switched to Cone 6, I just completely switched because I knew I would not be able to tell the difference between my Cone 10 porcelain and my Cone 6 B-Mix. I'm not crazy. I know my limitations.
I cannot blame you. But I am crazy, and I do not know my limitations.
Okay. Well, the Clay Guild is 100%
hopefully I don't have to
run
find
by
out the hard way.
volunteers.
See, there's your
Run,
issue.
managed, board, everything.
I hear that actually happens a lot. Like a co-op type
works.
thing.
Yeah, it actually works. It's not that there aren't little
As somebody,
funny political infightings and...
Oh yeah. As somebody who basically built this business with a single potter's wheel, the idea that there's multiple people helping is just, I can't even imagine.
What would I do with them?
Well, not only that, like, what would I be able to do with myself? You know, there's so much work to be done doing all this stuff. You know, I'm lucky I have volunteers. But, I'll tell you.
But at least there's arguably one person in charge.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Like, if it was run by volunteers, I don't know how I could justify being a part of it, you know? It's like, oh my gosh.
Well, see, that might be what would happen if you decided to move on down the line someplace.
Eventually, I'm going to have to hire people. Because I don't know if I've ever mentioned to you, my goal is to franchise.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that way I can provide the ability to do stuff in every city. Because I can make this type of business happen now that I've learned it. And basically did market research and data research for all these years. I can start one of these things for super cheap, and they can be fully up and running and ready in like 3 months tops.
I'm acting like this is a 12-inch high cup.
That's what I was wondering. Like, dang, what does she make?
Well, no, I'm trying to get so I can pick the part I want. You know exactly what
I know.
Now then. I would normally attach it to the...
And the best part is that it's very flexible. I just so happen to be a potter, and that's why we do pottery here, but it can be any craft.
Oh, that's true.
The business model would stay the same. Just prices would change based off of the degree of expense for each art.
Never will put this back, so I guess it goes in the bin.
When you have big chunks like that, you can always put them in any of the bags that look chunky.
Oh, that's true. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
I don't know how you manage the reclaiming and stuff.
Isn't it crazy?
I
There's not a single drop of waste here. Every last little
well,
bit.
and all of these sort of
Buckets and bags and more buckets. And
Let's do some of your white clay.
Yes, please.
I can find that.
Take as much as you like. What do you think about the business model of the way the price structure is?
Well, I actually have no clue quite how it really works and why it's set up the way it is.
Oh no, I mean from your point of view, like price per pound, the membership, all that stuff.
Well,
Like, have you ever been to a studio where everything was included like this?
no.
No? Is that convenient for you, do you think?
I am so used to like having my own tools, all my own stuff. I find it a little disconcerting. This model, and yet I would hope that this would really help to get in people who just, want to.
Never done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I started out taking several sets of lessons, and then you slowly end up with a trunk full of equipment.
Exactly. That's what we wanted to avoid for people, is having to have a trunk full of equipment. Now, some people really like that, and that's something that we have to eventually accommodate, that people do want their own tools, and we eventually will provide those. But so far, so good.
Okay, somebody else is using a little square. I noticed there was newspaper around. Oh, okay, there it is. I just realized I might be able to reclaim my own. What I was going to say is, if you ever need newspapers, let me know. One of the few people who actually buys a newspaper these days. Let's see.
Welcome to Brigham. Yeah, so in the beginning of the video, if you'd like to go and rewatch it, I gave all the instructions for the chucks, and now I'm just pumping them out. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. Sorry about that, I had a phone call. Yeah, and like I said, guys, the important information is at the beginning. There's no need to keep watching. I'm going to keep doing this live thing. I'm going to do one more tiny hollow chuck for very small Taiwanese tea bottles, and then I'll probably leave the rest of the wheels open for everybody else, because I'm taking up 4 as it is. These will be on here for at least a day. Alright, so this time, because I think you guys saw a lot of the explanation, I'm going to go ahead and flip you guys around so I can see your comments, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
White clay theft.
Yes, feel free. There's no stealing which are yours. And I'm using an old scanner holder for a register, but I have my phone just jammed in hardcore Potter style, so sorry about the craziness. It might fall into my bucket of water at some point, and that will end the video. Whoa.
soon.
It might be a little bit sooner than I thought. Just kidding. Okay, cool. Alright guys, I have a customer. I'll be right back. Thanks again. Uh-oh. She's pulling out the big guns. She's got an apron.
Well,
Everybody look out.
I just remembered I had to take off my pit bed.
It's so weird being able to see myself.